I don't trust the government. Not in a tinfoil hat, the birds aren't real kind of way. More in a, you charged me $200 for being born and I still don't know why kind of way. But here's the thing. Every time someone says the government is hiding something, people roll their eyes. They'll say conspiracy theorist, paranoid, you need to go outside. And honestly, that's fair. Most of the time, it's just a guy with a YouTube channel and a whiteboard connecting photos of celebrities to a pizza restaurant. But sometimes, they were actually hiding something. And not just hiding it, funding it, running it, classifying it for more than 30 years and then quietly releasing it on a Friday afternoon, hoping nobody would notice. So today, we're going to talk about the times the government did the exact thing people accused them of doing, got caught, and then said, yeah, but that was a long time ago. We're different now, which is also what I tell myself every time I open a food delivery app at 2 a.m. Let's start with a classic, MK Ultra. The government's official, we were just experimenting phase. In 1953, the CIA launched a program called MK Ultra, which was their attempt at developing mind control techniques. And when I say mind control, I don't mean like a Jedi mind trick. I mean they literally gave people LSD without telling them and watched what happened. That was the experiment. Just, surprise, acid. They tested it on college students, prisoners, mental patients, and my personal favorite, their own employees. Because apparently, the CIA's HR department was just a vibe back then. One army scientist named Frank Olson, who worked with the CIA, was dosed with LSD without his knowledge at a work retreat. A work retreat. Imagine going to a company's team building event, expecting trust falls and PowerPoint presentations, and instead your boss slips psychedelics into your drink to see if you would reveal state secrets. And you thought your office Christmas party was bad. Olson had a severe psychological breakdown and 9 days later fell from the 13th-story window of the Hotel Stadler in New York. The CIA called it a suicide, his family called it suspicious. When his body was examined in 1994, the medical examiner found a cranial injury suggesting he'd been knocked unconscious before the fall and ruled it a homicide. The CIA said oops and Congress said please don't do that again, which in government language means do it somewhere where we can see. The whole program ran for about 20 years. Over 150 sub-projects. They tested drugs, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, verbal abuse and isolation. Basically, they invented reality TV 40 years early. When it was finally exposed in 1975, the CIA director ordered all MK Ultra files destroyed. And they were, except for about 20,000 pages that were misfiled in the financial records. Because even the CIA can't figure out where things go in a file cabinet. Which honestly makes me feel better about losing my tax documents every single year. If MK Ultra was the government's experimental phase, Operation Northwoods was the I can't believe someone actually typed this up and submitted it phase. In 1962, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest-ranking military officials in the United States, drafted a proposal to commit acts of terrorism on American soil and blamed it on Cuba. The goal was to manufacture public support for war against Fidel Castro. And these weren't vague ideas scribbled on a napkin. This was a formal signed document submitted to the Secretary of Defense. The plan included blowing up an American ship, hijacking planes, and orchestrating bombings, and then planting evidence to frame Cuba. They even suggested creating fake casualty lists to generate public outrage. Full production. These people would have crushed it on Broadway. The only reason it didn't happen is because the proposal was rejected. Secretary of Defense McNamara shut it down, and President Kennedy made it clear that this was off the table. The chairman who submitted it, General Lyman Lemnitzer, was removed from his position. Not fired, not arrested, he was made Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. Because in the government, planning domestic terrorism gets you promoted to Europe, not terminated. It's like being moved to a nicer subway location after you get caught eating the ingredients. The document was classified for decades and only became widely known to the public in 2001 when journalist James Bamford wrote about it. Meaning for almost 40 years, the official government position on this was never happened, and the people saying it did were called crazy. Now this is my favorite, because it's the one where the US military spent 20 million trying to create psychic spies. And I mean that literally. They wanted people who could see the enemy base with their minds. The program was called Project Stargate, which is already a red flag, because that's clearly a name someone picked because they thought it sounded cool. That's not a military operation name, that's a Roblox server. Starting in the early 1970s, the Defense Intelligence Agency recruited people who claimed to have psychic abilities and asked them to do remote viewing, which means sitting in a room and trying to describe a location they've never been to, using nothing but their brains. The military would give them coordinates and they'd close their eyes and just start talking. And here's the insane part. Sometimes they were actually right. One remote viewer reportedly described a Soviet weapons facility with enough accuracy that analysts actually took it seriously. Another one was tasked with locating a downed bomber in Africa and gave a description that matched the crash site within a few miles. Now, before you start believing in psychic warfare, the program also produced results like, "I see a large body of water," when the target was in the middle of the desert, and one viewer described the target as an alien base on Mars. So the hit rate was inconsistent. The CIA eventually took over the program in 1995, reviewed it, and concluded that while some results were statistically interesting, remote viewing was not reliable enough for intelligence operations. Which is the nicest possible way of saying, this does not work, but we're scared to say it, and it was a complete waste of money. 20 million over 23 years. For reference, that's roughly what I'll spend on overpriced energy drinks in my entire lifetime. Except, at least those are confirmed to work. Speaking of the CIA, we need to talk about their obsession with Fidel Castro, because this wasn't a government operation, it was a grudge. According to Fabian Escalante, Cuba's former head of counterintelligence, there were 638 plots or schemes to kill Castro. The US Senate's Church Committee confirmed at least 8 CIA-run assassination attempts. Either way, at some point you have to respect the man's immune system. And these weren't all sniper-on-the-roof type plans. CIA got creative, disturbingly creative. They tried to poison his cigar with botulinum toxin. They designed a contaminated diving suit laced with skin disease and tuberculosis bacteria. They planned an exploding seashell to place on the ocean floor where he liked to dive. An exploding seashell. Someone at the CIA went home, kissed their kids goodnight and thought, tomorrow I'm gonna pitch the seashell idea. They even tried to make his beard fall out. Not to kill him, just embarrass him. Because apparently, the CIA believed that Castro's power came from his facial hair, like some kind of Caribbean Samson. The plan was to sneak thallium salts into his shoes, so his beard would fall out during a public speech, destroying his image. This is real. This happened. Grown adults in a suit sat around at a conference table and said, what if we make him look silly? Castro himself once said, if surviving assassination attempts were an Olympic event, I would win the gold medal. And the man's not wrong. That man outlived 10 US presidents and the entire Cold War. He died in 2016 at 90 years old. Of natural causes, the CIA could not have taken that well. At this point, you might be thinking it can't get any weirder than exploding seashells. But I need you to brace yourself because the CIA once surgically implanted a microphone and a radio transmitter into a live cat. The project was called Acoustic Kitty, which again, someone named this and felt good about it. The idea was that a cat could wander near a Soviet embassy and eavesdrop on conversations without arousing suspicion. Because who would suspect a cat? It's the perfect spy. Quiet, independent, doesn't ask questions. Basically everything the CIA wished their human agents were. They spent an estimated $10 to $20 million on this. On a spy cat. Your tax dollars, ladies and gentlemen. The cat's first mission was to eavesdrop on Soviet officials near their embassy in Washington, D.C. They released the cat from a van. According to a former CIA officer, Victor Macchiaretti, it walked into the street, got hit by a taxi, and the mission was over. Though a former CIA technical officer later disputed this and said that the cat survived, but the project was cancelled because, surprise, cats don't follow orders. Either way, the program was killed in 1967. Whether the cat died or not, the CIA later wrote in a memo that the concept was a remarkable scientific achievement, but that it would not lend itself in a practical sense to our highly specialized needs, which is the equivalent of crashing your car into a wall and saying, well, the engine still works. Now I've been focusing on the more funny ones, because honestly, some of these sound like rejected movie scripts, but there are programs that aren't funny at all. Operation Chaos was a CIA domestic surveillance program targeting American citizens who opposed the Vietnam War and participated in civil rights movements. Not foreign agents, not suspected terrorists, college students, journalists, and civil rights leaders. Over 300,000 people were indexed in a computer database with detailed files kept on over 7,000 Americans. COINTELPRO was the FBI's version. Targeting civilian rights organizations, feminist groups, anti-war movements. They infiltrated groups, sent fake letters to create internal conflict, blackmailed leaders, and sent Martin Luther King Jr. an anonymous letter that his associates interpreted as urging him to take his own life. That's not an exaggeration. The letter was later found in the files of the FBI's deputy director. These programs weren't about national security. They were about control, and they ran for years before anyone found out. So what do we do with all this? Honestly, I don't know. I'm not a political commentator, I'm a guy who still doesn't fully understand his own tax returns. But I think the takeaway is pretty simple. When someone says the government would never do that, the historical accurate response is they literally already did multiple times and then shredded the paperwork. Does that mean every conspiracy theory is true? No. the earth is not flat, 5G does not control your thoughts, and the birds are in fact real. I've seen them, they poop on my car. No government agency is funding that level of realism. But the line between paranoid conspiracy theorist and person who read declassified documents is thinner than most people are comfortable with. Anyway, I have to go. I'm pretty sure I'm on a list now for reading all the Wikipedia pages for all of this. So I'll see you in the next one, if I'm still alive.